The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the small-town courtroom, painting the worn wooden benches in golden stripes. It was unusually quiet for a trial of this magnitude. Most of the spectators had arrived hours earlier, filling the gallery with anxious murmurs, but a tense hush had settled over the room as the judge prepared to call the case. The trial was about Daniel Brooks, a local father who had mysteriously disappeared months ago, leaving behind his wife and 3-year-old daughter, Lily. The details of his disappearance had puzzled the police and terrified his family. Everyone who knew him said he was a devoted father and kind man, someone who would never leave his daughter voluntarily. In the front row, Daniel's wife, Jessica, sat clutching Lily's small hand. Lily, a bright-eyed girl with curly chestnut hair, was unusually quiet for a child of her age. Her tiny legs dangled from the bench, swinging slightly as she leaned forward to watch the proceedings. Jessica had dressed her in a soft pink dress, hoping that the familiar comfort of home colors might calm her daughter. But today, the courtroom's solemn atmosphere seemed to have made Lily unusually still, almost as if she sensed the weight of the day in a way that was far beyond her years. Beside the witness stand stood Rex, a trained police K-9, sitting perfectly still with his handler, Officer Martinez. Rex had been the lead dog in the original search for Daniel when he had gone missing. The dog was a large German shepherd, with alert, intelligent eyes and a calm presence. Though trained to handle chaos and stress, even Rex seemed aware of the tension in the courtroom. His ears twitched at every murmur, and his nose occasionally lifted as he sniffed the air, possibly catching scents of people who had been involved in the case in the past. The gallery murmured as the bailiff called the courtroom to order. Lawyers rustled papers nervously. The judge, a stern but fair woman named Judge Hamilton, adjusted her glasses and peered down at the proceedings. "We are here to continue the case of Daniel Brooks," she said in a firm voice. "We ask everyone present to remain respectful and attentive." Her gavel struck the desk with a sharp rap, and the room fell silent. Most people's eyes were on the lawyers and the evidence being presented, but Lily's attention had drifted elsewhere. She had been scanning the room quietly, as children often do, and her gaze fell upon Rex. Something about the dog seemed familiar, though she couldn't have explained why. It wasn't the uniformed presence of the handler or the polished leather leash that caught her attention. It was the dog himself. There was a softness in his eyes, a gentle alertness that made her feel as though she had met him before. Lily shifted on the bench, her small hands gripping the edge as she leaned slightly forward. Her mother noticed and smiled gently, thinking Lily might be curious about the big dog everyone had been talking about in the news reports. "Lily," Jessica whispered, "be polite and stay with me, okay?" But Lily barely acknowledged her. Her eyes remained locked on Rex, and her lips parted slightly as if she were trying to form words that she hadn't yet learned to say. The trial had been intense over the past few weeks. Witnesses had come forward, giving conflicting accounts of Daniel's last known movements. The local police had spent months following every lead, but most had led to dead ends. Rex had been central to the original search effort, following scents through backyards, streets, and even wooded areas near the highway where Daniel was last seen. The dog had performed extraordinary work, tracking leads that humans couldn't, yet somehow the trail had gone cold. Now in the courtroom, Rex seemed calm, but his handler knew him well enough to detect subtle tension. The dog's tail twitched slightly, his ears moving as though picking up signals in the air. The handler, Officer Martinez, whispered quietly to himself, "Stay calm, boy, just stay calm." He didn't know why Rex seemed more alert today than usual, but there was a strange energy about the room, something that was hard to put into words. Then it happened. Lily suddenly stood, her small frame rising from the bench so quickly that her mother gasped. "Lily, sit down," Jessica whispered sharply, grabbing her daughter's hand, but Lily pulled free. Her eyes were wide, focused on Rex. She pointed her tiny finger at him and held it there, trembling slightly, not with fear but with recognition. The courtroom fell silent. A judge, lawyers, reporters, and spectators all turned to look at the little girl who had suddenly disrupted the proceedings. It was unusual for a child to act this way, especially in such a serious setting. But there was something in Lily's demeanor that made everyone stop and pay attention. She wasn't screaming or crying. She wasn't demanding anything. She was simply staring at Rex, her lips quivering slightly, as if she had something important to say. Rex, for his part, lifted his head and slowly turned to face Lily. His ears perked up and his tail gave a subtle wag. The dog's eyes seemed to soften, almost as if he recognized her. Officer Martinez's brow furrowed in surprise. In all his years of handling Rex, he had never seen the dog react so strongly to a civilian, let alone a small child. The handler crouched slightly, whispering to the dog, "Easy, Rex. Easy." But Rex remained focused, completely undeterred by the courtroom's formalities. Whispers spread across the room like wildfire. People craned their necks, trying to see what had captured the child's attention so fully. The judge leaned forward slightly, curious. The prosecutor, a tall man named Mr. Hensley, stopped shuffling papers and looked at the scene unfolding before him. Even the defense attorney, usually detached, seemed taken aback by the intensity of the moment. Lily took a tiny step closer to Rex, her small pink shoes barely making a sound on the polished wooden floor. She pointed again, more insistently this time. Then, in a voice that seemed impossibly clear for her age, she said the words that would stop the courtroom in its tracks: "Hero dog." The phrase was so simple, yet it carried an undeniable weight. Every eye turned toward her, and every head in the room instinctively understood that something extraordinary had just happened. Rex's tail wagged harder, and he took a careful step forward, his gaze unwavering. Officer Martinez blinked rapidly, unsure how to react. The child's mother, Jessica, felt her heart pound. She hadn't expected her tiny daughter to say anything that would draw such attention. Yet here she was, standing in a courtroom, calling a police K9 a hero dog in front of dozens of adults who had been following the case for months. The judge leaned back slightly in her chair, studying the child. "Did you just say something, young lady?" she asked softly, her voice gentle yet commanding. Lily nodded and pointed again at Rex. "Hero dog," she repeated. The words echoed through the room, carrying with them an unspoken message that something critical had been overlooked, something that the child and the dog both remembered. From that moment, everyone in the courtroom realized that the morning was far from ordinary. The case that had seemed routine, though tense, had just taken an unexpected turn. A 3-year-old girl and a police K9 were about to change everything. This expanded Part 1, approximately 1-200 words, sets up the story's tension, the emotional stakes, the characters, and the unusual connection between Lily and Rex. It ends on a suspenseful note, keeping readers eager for Part 2. If you want, I can continue with Part 2 fully expanded to 1,200 words next, keeping the story just as suspenseful and engaging. Do you want me to continue Part 2 now? The courtroom had never been so quiet. The soft sound of Lily's voice saying "hero dog" still hung in the air, echoing off the high ceilings. Spectators whispered among themselves, their curiosity mingled with disbelief. Lawyers froze mid-motion, pens suspended above papers as if time itself had paused. Even the judge, who had seen hundreds of cases, leaned forward in her chair, intrigued. Something extraordinary was happening, and everyone could sense it. Lily's small frame barely reached the edge of the bench, yet she stood tall, pointing her tiny finger toward Rex, the police K9. She trembled slightly, not from fear but from the intensity of recognition. It was as if some deep memory, long buried in her young mind, had suddenly surfaced. Jessica, her mother, felt her heart skip a beat. She tried to step forward to guide her daughter back to the bench, whispering, "Lily, honey, sit down, please." But Lily shook her head firmly, her gaze never leaving Rex. Rex's reaction was even more remarkable. The trained K9 lifted his massive head, his pointed ears alert and rigid. His eyes, intelligent and piercing, seemed to study Lily as if he, too, remembered something long forgotten. A soft wag of his tail betrayed recognition, or maybe anticipation. Officer Martinez, Rex's handler, immediately sensed something unusual. He had handled this dog through countless high-stress scenarios, but nothing like this had ever happened. The dog was fixated on a 3-year-old girl in the middle of a courtroom. "Stay calm, Rex," Officer Martinez muttered under his breath. "Easy, boy, easy." But the dog did not waver. His body remained tense, his gaze locked on the child. Every instinct in the dog's trained mind screamed at him that something important was unfolding. Martinez knew that the canine's senses were far more attuned than humans could ever comprehend. Rex could detect emotions, recognize scents, and remember people he had once worked with. Right now, he was trying to communicate something that no one in the room yet understood. The spectators whispered among themselves, some leaning forward to catch every subtle movement. One elderly woman murmured, "Why is she pointing at the dog? What does she know?" A young reporter scribbled furiously in her notebook, realizing this was far more than a routine courtroom scene. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Even he had to admit that the child's words and actions were unusual, almost eerie. There was a tension in the air that could be cut with a knife. Lily's lips quivered and her small hands clutched the air in front of her. She wasn't speaking loudly, but every word seemed to carry weight. "Hero dog," she repeated once more. And then softly, almost in a whisper, she added, "Find Daddy." A hush fell over the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the spectators. The judge raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. "Did you just say, 'Find Daddy'?" she asked gently, her tone calm but measured. Lily nodded, her tiny chin lifting with determination. Her mother, Jessica, felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected her 3-year-old to speak in such clear, meaningful phrases, especially in a room full of strangers. Officer Martinez stepped closer to Rex, kneeling slightly to steady him. "Easy, boy," he murmured again, but the dog's behavior intensified. Rex began to growl softly, a low rumble that reverberated through his chest. It wasn't aggressive, it was alert, focused. He was trying to communicate to the humans around him that something critical was about to happen. The courtroom collectively held its breath. The prosecutor, Mr. Hensley, slowly approached Lily, kneeling down to her level with a calm, reassuring smile. "Sweetheart, can you tell us what you mean by 'find Daddy'?" he asked gently. Lily blinked, her eyes bright and serious. "Dog tried to find Daddy," she said. Her voice was small but firm. "Rex. He came before. He sniffed Daddy, but bad man made him go away." A murmur of shock swept through the room. The judge's jaw tightened slightly as she processed the child's words. The term "bad man," in connection with the missing father, immediately caught the attention of the authorities present. It suggested that there might have been someone interfering with the search all along, someone who had deliberately obstructed the investigation. Jessica clutched Lily's hand tightly, fighting back tears. Her daughter, in her innocence, had recalled a crucial memory that adults had overlooked. The fact that she could remember even fragments of the night Daniel disappeared was astonishing. But it wasn't just the memory itself. It was the connection she had made to Rex, the police K9. This small child had recognized the dog, remembered his role, and linked him to her father's disappearance in a way no one else had. Rex, seemingly understanding the gravity of the moment, took a careful step forward, straining against the leash. His growl became slightly louder, more insistent. Officer Martinez held him firmly, whispering for him to remain calm, but it was clear that the dog's instincts had already taken over. Every fiber of his being was alert, ready to act on a scent or a memory long dormant. The courtroom watchers were tense, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Witnesses who had spoken about Daniel's disappearance in previous hearings looked at one another in disbelief. How could a 3-year-old child and a police dog suddenly bring clarity to a case that had gone cold for months? It defied logic. The judge signaled for a brief recess, sensing that this moment required careful attention. "Let's take 5 minutes," she said, her tone firm but curious. "We need to ensure that everyone is prepared to proceed with this new development." Spectators murmured quietly as officers and lawyers gathered near the front of the room. Outside the courtroom, investigators quickly whispered among themselves, sharing pieces of information they had collected over the past months. One officer noted that Rex had indeed been part of the original search, that night Daniel went missing. The dog had followed the scent of Daniel to a nearby alleyway, then abruptly stopped. No one had been able to determine why the trail ended. But now, with Lily's words, the pieces were starting to make sense. Perhaps the child remembered something that Rex had sensed, but could not communicate before. Meanwhile, Lily's attention remained unwavering. She had briefly glanced at her mother, who nodded reassuringly, then returned her gaze to Rex. There was an almost tangible bond forming between the two, a silent understanding that bridged the gap between human and animal. It was as if the dog knew she could help guide the investigation, that her memory and his instincts together could reveal the truth. Officer Martinez, still holding the leash tightly, whispered to the investigators, "I've never seen him act like this. He's never been distracted by anyone. He's focused, completely focused on her." One detective replied, "It's as if he remembers the night of the disappearance. Maybe he recognizes her too." As the 5-minute recess ended, the courtroom reconvened. Everyone present understood that this trial had taken an unexpected turn. The missing father's case, once hopelessly cold, now had a spark of hope. A 3-year-old girl and a police K-9 had created a bridge between the past and the present, a connection that adults had overlooked. Judge Hamilton adjusted her glasses, looking directly at Lily. "Young lady," she said softly, "we need your help today. Can you tell us more about what you remember?" Lily nodded solemnly, pointing once more to Rex. Her words were quiet, but every person in the courtroom leaned in to hear them. "Rex, fine daddy, bad man, no let dog." Those words sent a chill through everyone. The implication was clear. Someone had actively interfered with the search, preventing Rex from finding Daniel. The officers exchanged glances, knowing that this revelation could change the course of the investigation. Lily's memory, combined with Rex's instincts, had uncovered something that had eluded them for months. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in the courtroom. It was faint, fragile, yet unmistakable. A tiny girl and a loyal K-9 had reminded everyone that even the smallest witnesses could hold the key to the truth. And as Lily and Rex shared that silent, unspoken connection, it became clear that the morning was about to become a turning point in the case of Daniel Brooks. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Lily's small voice, repeating the words "hero dog," had sent ripples through the air, and now her follow-up, "fine daddy, bad man, no let dog," hung over everyone like a whispered warning. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, journalists scribbled furiously, and even the judge, a veteran accustomed to high-profile cases, was visibly stunned. The trial had begun as a tense but ordinary matter of law and procedure, but in this moment it transformed into something extraordinary, almost surreal. The words were simple, 2 of them in fact, that anyone could have overlooked, yet the weight they carried was enormous. Hero dog, not just a phrase, not just a child's innocent observation. It was a clue, a recognition, and a revelation all at once. It implied that Rex, the police K-9, had done something remarkable in the past, and it implied that Lily had witnessed it, or at least remembered it in a fragmentary, childlike way. Jessica, Lily's mother, felt her heart pound against her chest. She had known her daughter was unusually bright for her age, but even she was stunned at how clearly Lily had spoken. "Lily," she whispered under her breath, her hand gripping the child, "you're very brave, honey." She glanced around nervously, realizing the weight of the room's attention, but Lily barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on Rex, and her small finger still pointed at him. Rex, for his part, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. His gaze never wavered from Lily, and his body remained tense, alert, and ready. Officer Martinez, kneeling beside him, whispered, "Good boy, stay calm, stay calm." But even he could not hide the awe in his voice. He had handled Rex through countless search operations, including the original night Daniel disappeared, but never had he seen the dog react so strongly to a civilian, especially a child. It was as if Rex remembered the past night, the search, the scents, and the obstacle that had stopped him cold. The judge, her voice measured but curious, finally addressed the child directly. "Lily, can you tell us what you mean by hero dog?" Lily looked up at her, her eyes wide and solemn. "Rex, help Daddy," she said simply. Her words were clear enough that everyone in the room leaned in to hear. "Rex, try bad man, go away." Gasps swept through the spectators. The implication was unmistakable. Someone had actively interfered with the original search, preventing Rex from completing his mission. The courtroom murmured, but no one dared interrupt. The child had said something critical, something that could unravel months of uncertainty. The prosecutor, Mr. Hensley, took a deep breath and moved closer, kneeling down to meet Lily at her level. "Lily, sweetie," he said gently, "can you tell us who the bad man is?" Lily hesitated, her small brow furrowing as if recalling a fragmented memory. "Him," she whispered, pointing toward a man sitting quietly at the back of the courtroom gallery. Her finger trembled slightly. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence as every person instinctively followed her gaze. The man at the back shifted nervously under the attention. His face was pale and beads of sweat formed at his hairline. He looked around as if hoping the room's focus would drift elsewhere, but it didn't. The judge's eyes narrowed, and officers at the ready exchanged quick, meaningful glances. The man's body language screamed guilt, even before anyone had approached him. Officer Martinez gently patted Rex, whose growl had deepened, low and rumbling, his hackles raised ever so slightly. The dog had picked up a scent, a residual memory of the person involved that humans could not perceive. Every instinct in Rex told him that this man had played a role in preventing the discovery of Daniel Brooks. The realization was chilling, and the courtroom could feel it. Jessica gasped quietly, her hand tightening around Lily's. She hadn't known that her daughter had retained any memory from the night Daniel disappeared, let alone such a vivid, clear recollection. Yet here it was, revealed through innocent words that had shattered the calm of the courtroom. Reporters scribbled notes frantically, realizing this was more than a dramatic courtroom moment. It was a breakthrough in a cold case that had baffled the local police for months. The judge tapped her gavel lightly, signaling for order. "All right," she said firmly. "We need to proceed carefully. Officers, please approach. We may have new information that requires immediate attention." Several uniformed officers moved toward the back, their steps quiet but deliberate. The man Lily had pointed to shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between the approaching officers and the child who had identified him. Rex, sensing the movement, stiffened. His tail, which had previously wagged tentatively, now rose slightly as he prepared for action. His eyes locked on the man, unwavering and focused. Officer Martinez whispered, "Stay, Rex, stay." But the dog's gaze remained fixed, his instincts screaming that the man was indeed a key part of the case. The courtroom was tense, holding its collective breath, watching this silent but extraordinary interaction. Mr. Hensley, the prosecutor, turned to the judge. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "this child may have identified the person who interfered with the original search. Combined with Rex's reaction, this is evidence that can't be ignored." The judge nodded slightly, understanding the weight of the statement. In a courtroom where facts and procedure typically ruled, the testimony of a 3-year-old and the instincts of a dog were being treated with the utmost seriousness. The man at the back stood abruptly, his face pale. I don't know what she means," he stammered, his voice shaky. "This child is confused, she doesn't know anything." But his words did little to mask his fear. Officers quickly surrounded him, requesting identification. Meanwhile, Rex's growl deepened, resonating through the room like a warning. The dog was communicating more clearly than words could. Something was very wrong, and he knew it. Lily, unfazed by the growing tension, repeated softly, "Rex, find Daddy, bad man." Her tone was serious, almost commanding, as if she were instructing the dog. The courtroom felt the weight of her words. It was more than a child's memory. It was a key piece of the puzzle that had been missing for months. And the K-9, trained to act on instincts that humans couldn't understand, was responding exactly as he should. Detectives and officers whispered among themselves, quickly piecing together the timeline. Rex had been part of the original search team. That night, he had tracked Daniels sent to a location where the man now sat quietly in the gallery. The trail had mysteriously ended there. Now, months later, a child's memory and the dog's instincts converged to reveal the man's involvement in obstructing the investigation. It was a breakthrough they had not anticipated. The judge cleared her throat, regaining control of the room. "Sir," she said, addressing the man, "it appears that your presence here is linked to evidence that was previously obstructed. We will need to question you further." The man swallowed hard, his face drained of color. Officers began guiding him toward the front, while Rex's eyes never left him. Even in a crowded courtroom, the bond between the child and the dog had become a silent force, demanding attention. Jessica's hand trembled slightly as she held Lily. She whispered, "You did something amazing, baby." Lily only nodded, her focus still on Rex, who remained alert, unwavering, ready to act at the slightest signal. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom that this case had changed dramatically in the span of a few minutes. A small girl's memory and a dog's extraordinary instincts had shifted the entire investigation into a new direction. The spectators, once passive observers of a routine legal proceeding, were now witnesses to something extraordinary. Some whispered excitedly, others simply stared, trying to comprehend the unusual collaboration between human memory and canine instinct. Reporters furiously typed notes, knowing that this story was going to make headlines, not just for the case, but for the inexplicable, almost miraculous connection between a child and a police K9. And through it all, Lily remained steady. Her tiny voice had unveiled a critical truth, her memory had illuminated a dark corner of the investigation, and Rex had responded exactly as needed. Together, they had created a moment that no one would forget, a moment where innocence and instinct combined to pierce through months of mystery. By the end of that day's hearing, it was clear to everyone present. The missing father's case was no longer a dead end. The small, innocent words of a 3-year-old girl, coupled with the unwavering instincts of a trained K9, had shifted the entire investigation. Hero Dog had become more than a phrase. It was a revelation. And the courtroom, once calm and procedural, was now a stage for a mystery unraveling before everyone's eyes. The courtroom had shifted from tense curiosity to electric anticipation. Every person present could feel that something extraordinary was unfolding. The man Lily had pointed to at the back of the courtroom now sat in uneasy silence, officers flanking him as they prepared to investigate further. Yet the real focus remained on Rex, the police K9, who had refused to look away from the suspect. His ears were fully perked, his tail stiff, and a low growl rumbled deep in his chest. A sound that commanded attention, signaling that the dog had sensed danger, deceit, or some hidden truth. Rex had been through countless high-pressure situations, tracking missing persons in forests, apprehending criminals, and working alongside officers in tense investigations. But nothing had prepared Officer Martinez for this. The dog was behaving in a way that was almost human in its understanding. It wasn't aggression, it was recognition. The kind that only came from memory, instinct, and experience combined. The courtroom collectively held its breath as Rex slowly inched forward, still on his leash, but moving with purpose toward the man at the back. Whispers spread through the spectators like wildfire. "Why is the dog acting like that?" one elderly woman asked softly to her neighbor. A journalist raised his notebook to record every detail, knowing that the scene before him was far more extraordinary than any courtroom drama he had covered before. The judge's eyes narrowed, taking in the unusual behavior. She was a seasoned professional, used to unpredictable moments in court, but even she could not remember a scene quite like this. A toddler, a police dog, and a man who now seemed more guilty than innocent simply by the canine's instincts. Officer Martinez knelt beside Rex, whispering, "Easy, boy, stay." Yet the dog's focus never wavered. His eyes were fixed, his body taut, and the growl in his throat had become louder, almost vibrating through the wooden floors. It was as if Rex was signaling to the humans in the room, "This man is connected. Pay attention." Every officer in the room instinctively understood that the dog's instincts were acting as a guide, something humans alone could not detect. Lily, unaware of the increasing tension, remained focused on Rex. Her tiny finger was still pointed toward him, almost commanding. "Find Daddy," she repeated, her voice soft but firm. She had no idea of the magnitude of the impact her words were having on the courtroom. She simply remembered, on the night her father disappeared, the dog had come close, had sniffed, and had tried to lead the officers to him before something or someone stopped him. Now, months later, she was witnessing a replay, in a sense, of what had happened that night. The man at the back shifted in his seat, realizing the dog's focus was unwavering. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead and he swallowed nervously. He was silent, but every movement betrayed his unease. Officer Martinez, sensing the potential escalation, adjusted his grip on the leash, ready to restrain Rex if necessary, but unwilling to stop the dog from communicating. In that moment, the courtroom understood something remarkable. A police K-9, trained to act in tense situations, was now an active witness in a way no one could argue against. The judge leaned forward, signaling for quiet. "Sir," she said calmly, addressing the man at the back, "you are being observed closely for behavior relevant to this case. Do not make sudden movements." The man nodded slightly, though his hands trembled. His composure was cracking, and Rex could sense it. The dog's growl softened slightly, but his gaze remained locked. Every person in the room could see the intensity of his focus. Detectives in the courtroom began whispering among themselves, reviewing details they had known for months. Rex had been a critical part of the original search operation for Daniel Brooks, the missing father. He had tracked the scent through neighborhoods, backyards, and wooded areas. On the night Daniel disappeared, the dog had followed a trail to a location near the highway where the man now sat. There, inexplicably, the scent trail had stopped. Now, with Lily's words guiding them, the pieces began to align. The dog's unusual behavior was confirmation that the man had played a direct role in obstructing the original search. Lily's mother, Jessica, whispered softly to her daughter, "You're doing so well, honey. You're helping everyone find Daddy." Lily nodded, seemingly proud that she was contributing. She had no idea of the courtroom's attention, the cameras recording every movement, or the reporters noting the unusual behavior of both her and Rex. To her, it was simply a matter of recognizing the dog who had once tried so hard to help her father. The dog's movements grew more pronounced. He leaned slightly forward, straining against the leash. His growl was now a low, vibrating hum, resonating through the courtroom. Officer Martinez adjusted his hold, whispering reassurance, "Good boy, easy." But even he felt the weight of what was happening. Every instinct Rex had, every memory of the night of Daniel's disappearance was coming to the surface. The K-9 was doing what humans could not, directly connecting the suspect with a critical piece of evidence. The man at the back began to shift uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Every officer present could see the tension radiating from him. For months, he had avoided scrutiny, confident that no direct evidence linked him to Daniel's disappearance. Yet now, a 3-year-old child and a police K-9 had rendered him incapable of hiding. The courtroom seemed to collectively recognize the impossibility of ignoring this moment. The judge signaled for a short recess to allow the officers to assess the situation. Everyone in the courtroom whispered quietly, speculating about the events. Some spectators were in awe, some in disbelief, and some were visibly emotional, realizing the small child and the dog might be key to solving a month-long mystery. The prosecutors, detectives, and officers quickly huddled, discussing the implications. Officer Martinez knelt beside Rex, stroking his head gently. "Good boy," he whispered. "You remembered." Rex's ears twitched, and he gave a small wag of his tail, almost acknowledging that he had been understood. The dog's unusual behavior, previously inexplicable, now carried profound meaning. He had remembered the scent, remembered the obstruction, and was helping the humans to act. As the recess ended, everyone returned to their seats, tension thicker than ever. The suspect was escorted closer, the man's face pale, his hands nervously fidgeting. The courtroom's attention was unwavering. Rex's eyes followed him, unwavering, steady, unflinching. The judge spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We will now continue with questioning. Officers, please proceed carefully." Lily remained seated, her small hand clutching her mother. She looked up at Rex, then at the man, and whispered quietly, "Find Daddy." The words were simple, yet their impact was profound. The room seemed to hold its breath once more, as the connection between the child, the dog, and the suspect became undeniable. The unusual behavior of Rex had shifted the courtroom's energy. What had begun as a routine trial was now a tense, almost electrified space where instinct, memory, and courage converged. Every movement, every growl, every word from Lily carried weight beyond comprehension. The courtroom, once procedural and orderly, had transformed into a stage for revelation, a moment where innocence, loyalty, and instinct combined to uncover the truth. And as the proceedings continued, it became evident that the dog's unusual behavior was no longer a curiosity. It was a guide, a silent witness, and a force that no human argument could ignore. Every person in that room knew it. The mystery of Daniel Brooks' disappearance was about to shift dramatically, and Rex, the K-9 hero, was at the center of it all. The courtroom was thick with anticipation. Every eye followed the small figure of Lily, clutching her mother's hand, as she gazed steadily at Rex. The police dog's body remained taut, ears perked, eyes unwavering. It was clear to everyone in the room that something critical was unfolding, something that went far beyond routine courtroom procedure. The suspect, a man who had previously evaded investigation, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his hands fidgeting nervously in his lap. Every instinct in the room told the officers that the child and the dog had identified him as a key piece of the puzzle. Jessica, holding Lily's tiny hand, whispered softly, "Honey, it's okay, you're helping." Lily didn't respond, her attention fixed entirely on Rex. She remembered a night she was far too young to fully understand, but the memory had been etched deep in her subconscious. She remembered flashing lights, shouting voices, and a large, determined dog who had tried to lead the officers to her father. That night had been chaotic, terrifying, and confusing. But now, in the quiet courtroom, fragments of that memory surfaced in perfect clarity. Rex's growl, low and insistent, reminded everyone of the night Daniel had vanished. Months ago, he had tracked the scent of Daniel Brooks through the neighborhood, following the trail with unwavering precision. The trail had led him close to the suspect, who had unknowingly or deliberately blocked the dog's path, preventing him from discovering Daniel's exact location. It had been a crucial moment, one that changed the course of the investigation. Now, the dog's instincts were replaying that night, and Lily's memory provided the missing context. The judge leaned forward, her gaze steady but intrigued. "Detectives," she said, her voice calm, "please provide any information you have about the original search. What was discovered that night?" Detective Morales, a seasoned investigator who had worked the case from the beginning, rose. "Your Honor," Rex tracked the scent to a residential area near the highway. At that time, we lost the trail, no explanation why. Our reports indicate that there was someone present near the location, but we had no direct evidence connecting them to the disappearance. Until today, that is. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Spectators exchanged glances, some whispering, others simply staring, trying to absorb the gravity of the revelation. It was becoming clear that Lily and Rex were providing insights that humans alone had overlooked. The child's memory, combined with the dog's instincts, was revealing a connection that no one had previously seen. The prosecutor, Mr. Hensley, stepped forward carefully, lowering his voice so Lily could hear. "Lily," he said gently, "can you tell us more about what happened the night your daddy disappeared?" Lily nodded slowly, her eyes wide and serious. "Dog tried, go bad man stop. "Daddy," she trailed off, struggling to find words that a 3-year-old could articulate, but the meaning was unmistakable. Rex, sensing her intent, stepped slightly closer as if urging her to continue. Jessica's hand tightened around Lily's, fighting back tears. She had never expected her daughter to recall such a pivotal detail from the night of Daniel's disappearance. The fact that Lily had retained this memory, and that Rex responded instinctively, was beyond extraordinary. It was a living connection to the events that had remained a mystery for months. Detective Morales motioned to a team of officers who quietly moved toward the suspect. "Sir," he said firmly, "we need to speak with you about the night of Daniel Brooks' disappearance." The man's eyes darted toward Rex, whose intense gaze never wavered. His shoulders tensed. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure, but the dog's presence seemed to unravel his courage. Every instinct told Rex that this man was the same person who had blocked him from completing the original search. The courtroom felt as if it had become a stage where instinct, memory, and truth converged. The judge maintained control, but even she could feel the unusual energy radiating through the room. "Officers," she said, "please proceed with questioning carefully and respectfully. We are dealing with new evidence that may be critical." The officers nodded, fully aware that every action they took would be closely observed, not just by the courtroom, but by the small child and the dog who had pointed them toward the hidden truth. Lily took a deep breath and whispered, "Rex, find Daddy." The dog's ears perked instantly. He leaned forward, low growl vibrating through his chest. It was as if he understood exactly what she meant, what the child remembered, and what the dog had attempted to do months earlier. Every officer in the courtroom recognized that this was not a simple coincidence. The K-9's instincts were providing corroboration of Lily's recollection, something human testimony alone could not have accomplished. The man at the back, now standing under the scrutiny of both humans and the dog, shifted uncomfortably. He tried to speak, his voice shaky. I don't know what she's talking about. That dog, I wasn't there." His denials were weak, hollow, and immediately contradicted by the behaviors unfolding before everyone's eyes. Rex's growl intensified slightly, his nose lifting as he caught the lingering scent of the events from that night. The dog's behavior made it impossible for anyone to ignore the evidence implied by instinct. Detective Morales stepped forward, showing the man some of the original reports. "Sir, Rex tracked a scent that led directly to this area months ago. The search was obstructed at a critical point, and we now have witness testimony, albeit from a young child, that aligns perfectly with Rex's behavior that night. You need to explain your presence and actions." The man's face paled further, his eyes darting between the officers and Rex. Every instinct in the courtroom, from the officers to the judge, recognized that the dog's behavior was truth in motion. Lily's tiny voice broke the silence again. "Bad man, Daddy." Her simple words cut through months of confusion and obstruction. She had no idea that her memory, paired with Rex's instincts, had created a bridge between lost evidence and the missing father's location. The courtroom collectively leaned forward, caught in the spell of a child and a dog providing clarity where adults had failed. Rex moved closer under Officer Martinez's careful hold, sniffing the air around the suspect. His behavior remained calm but focused. Every muscle in his body communicated alertness and recognition. He was signaling that this man was not innocent, that something had been hidden from human eyes, and that the truth was finally surfacing. The officer whispered, "Easy, Rex, just stay focused." But the dog's message was unmistakable. The judge's gaze swept across the courtroom. "It is clear that new information has emerged," she said, her voice steady but firm. "We will proceed cautiously, but the connections presented here cannot be ignored. This court recognizes that both the recollection of a young witness and the behavior of a trained police K-9 are contributing to new evidence. Officers, you may continue your inquiry." The man swallowed hard, his composure finally breaking. His voice trembled as he attempted an explanation, though it lacked credibility. Every person in the courtroom sensed that the moment of truth was near. Rex's eyes never left the man, and Lily, the small girl who had pointed to him, remained unwavering. In the intersection of innocence and instinct, months of confusion and lost evidence were now beginning to unravel. Jessica held her daughter close, whispering, "You're so brave, Lily. You're helping everyone find Daddy." Lily's lips curved into a tiny, determined smile. She didn't fully understand the courtroom, the law, or the months of investigation. But she understood Rex, and she remembered the night her father disappeared. That was enough. By the end of the session, it was undeniable. The child's memory and the dog's instincts had revealed a hidden connection that no human investigation had uncovered. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. A man who had been a silent obstruction to the original search was now directly linked to Daniel Brooks' disappearance, thanks to the collaboration of innocence and instinct. The courtroom felt the weight of history in that moment. Months of unanswered questions, false leads, and dead ends were now converging toward clarity, and in the center of it all were two unlikely heroes, a 3-year-old girl who remembered and a police dog who never forgot. The courtroom had become a stage for revelation. The tension in the room was palpable, as if everyone present instinctively understood that the case of Daniel Brooks' disappearance was on the verge of being solved. Rex, the police K9, remained alert, his eyes fixed unwaveringly on the suspect. The 3-year-old Lily clutched her mother's hand, her gaze never leaving the dog. Together, Child and K9 had become an unexpected team, guiding the investigation where months of human effort had failed. Detectives quietly moved toward the suspect, their presence both intimidating and authoritative. The man's face was pale, sweat forming along his temples, his hands shaking as he fidgeted in his seat. He knew, instinctively, that Rex's unflinching attention and Lily's clear memory had eliminated any ability to maintain deception. Months of secrecy, of misleading the police, were crumbling before him. Every subtle movement of the dog seemed to reinforce his guilt, making it impossible for anyone to doubt that he had played a role in obstructing the search. Officer Martinez crouched slightly beside Rex, keeping a careful hold on the leash. The dog's growl had subsided into a low hum, but his gaze remained intense, focused, and unwavering. The canine had followed scents that were invisible to human senses, remembered events that had occurred months ago, and had now confirmed, through instinct and reaction, the child's recollection. It was a combination that no human could replicate, a memory, a sense of loyalty, and years of training coming together to point toward the truth. The judge, recognizing the significance of the moment, addressed the courtroom. "We are witnessing evidence in a form we rarely see in this court," she said, her voice steady but commanding. "The recollection of a young witness, corroborated by the behavior of a trained police K9, is contributing to this investigation. Officers, you may proceed with questioning and evidence collection." Detective Morales stepped forward, motioning toward the man. "Sir, we have new information based on Rex's behavior and the testimony of a witness who was present on the night of Daniel Brooks' disappearance," he said firmly. "You need to explain your actions that evening. Every inconsistency will be noted, and the court will consider it." The suspect's hands shook as he attempted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He realized that the courtroom was no longer a place where he could control the narrative. Lily, unaware of the full implications, shifted slightly on her mother's lap. She pointed at Rex and whispered, "Go find Daddy." The words, though small, seemed to act as a signal. Rex's ears perked, and he took a cautious step forward. Every movement of the dog carried a message that only those paying attention could understand. He knew the path, he remembered the scent, and he was ready to act if needed. Officer Martinez guided Rex carefully, making sure the dog's behavior remained controlled while still allowing his instincts to communicate. "Good boy, easy," he murmured. The dog responded with a slight wag of his tail, his eyes still locked on the suspect. The subtle movement conveyed confidence and awareness, reinforcing the impression that Rex was not just reacting. He was identifying, confirming, and signaling that the missing link had been found. Detectives began reviewing the case files on a tablet in real time, cross-referencing the child's testimony with Rex's behavior. They noted the timeline of events, the locations visited by the dog during the original search, and the points where the scent had abruptly ended. All signs pointed to the man now sitting nervously under the scrutiny of the court. The combination of instinct and memory provided a clarity that months of investigation had failed to achieve. The judge observed the proceedings carefully, noting the unprecedented collaboration between human recollection and animal instinct. "It is clear that we are dealing with evidence that cannot be ignored," she said. "The court will allow law enforcement to follow leads suggested by the child's testimony and the dog's behavior. Every action will be documented, and all findings will be presented here." Rex, sensing the increased activity and focus on the suspect, grew more animated. His low growl returned briefly, his stance firm but controlled. Officer Martinez adjusted his hold on the leash, allowing the dog to signal without letting him act impulsively. Every subtle gesture of Rex communicated recognition and validation of the child's memory. The courtroom, though silent, seemed to acknowledge the gravity of the moment. A K-9 had become a witness, and a child's memory was guiding the search for a missing father. Jessica whispered softly to Lily, "You're helping, baby. Daddy going to be found." Lily nodded solemnly, her small face serious. She had no understanding of the full legal or procedural implications, but she understood Rex. She remembered the night of her father's disappearance, and she knew that her words could guide him. That connection, pure and instinctive, was more powerful than any human testimony alone. Officers quietly excused the suspect from the courtroom to collect additional evidence, while detectives coordinated to trace the path Rex had indicated. The dog's instincts had revealed a location that had previously been overlooked, a storage shed near the outskirts of town where Daniel's last known scent had been strongest. The revelation was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't understand canine behavior, but to Officer Martinez, it was undeniable. Rex had remembered. Rex had identified the path. As the investigation continued in real time, the courtroom remained in a state of heightened awareness. Every whisper, every glance, every movement seemed magnified by the significance of what was unfolding. The press scribbled notes furiously, capturing the unprecedented collaboration between child and dog, while spectators watched, captivated by the drama that had turned from courtroom procedure into a live search for truth. The suspect's demeanor deteriorated further as he realized that his attempts to mislead investigators had failed. The child had remembered, the dog had remembered, and the combination had revealed critical evidence. There was no escaping the implications. Every officer and detective in the room recognized that months of investigation had been supplemented, and perhaps even surpassed, by the unlikely duo of Lily and Rex. As the day drew on, evidence began to surface more clearly. Items connected to Daniel Brooks' disappearance, previously thought lost or irrelevant, were located near the shed indicated by Rex. Investigators carefully documented everything, photographing the area and collecting items for forensic examination. The dog's behavior had provided not just a direction, but confirmation that the evidence was significant and relevant. Lily, watching Rex and the investigators, whispered quietly again, "Rex, Daddy." The words, though simple, carried the weight of months of worry, fear, and uncertainty. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the moment when the truth would finally become undeniable. In that moment, the bond between child and dog, between memory and instinct, had changed the course of the investigation. Officer Martinez knelt beside Rex, whispering softly, "Good boy, you remembered." The dog gave a subtle wag of his tail, acknowledging the validation, as if signaling that the final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The combination of Lily's recollection and Rex's instincts had guided investigators to the evidence that would ultimately reveal what had happened to Daniel Brooks. By the end of the day, it was clear to everyone present. The missing father's fate was no longer a mystery. A 3-year-old girl and a police dog had uncovered critical leads, pointed to the suspect, and guided investigators to evidence that human intuition alone could not have found. The courtroom, once procedural and tense, had become a stage for an extraordinary demonstration of memory, instinct, and courage. The courtroom had settled into an anxious, almost reverent silence. Every person present could feel that the case of Daniel Brooks' disappearance was approaching a resolution. The man who had obstructed the investigation sat pale and uneasy, aware that every instinct in the room, including that of a 3-year-old child and a police K9, was pointing directly at him. Rex, the police dog, remained alert and unwavering, his gaze locked on the suspect, ears fully perked. Every muscle in his body was tense with anticipation. Lily sat on her mother's lap, small fingers clutching Jessica's hand, eyes fixed on the dog. She didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation, but she knew Rex had once tried to find her father and that he was now trying again. Her voice, small but firm, whispered repeatedly, "Rex, find Daddy." Officer Martinez, kneeling beside the dog, adjusted the leash carefully, ensuring that Rex could act on instinct without creating chaos in the courtroom. Detective Morales, reviewing the map of the original search area, pointed toward the outskirts of town where Rex had last picked up Daniel's scent months ago. "That shed near the old highway," he explained quietly to the officers. "That's where the trail ended before, and Rex's behavior today suggests it's worth a second look." The team of officers moved efficiently, aware that every moment counted. Even the judge, while remaining in the courtroom, followed the updates with rapt attention. Rex seemed to understand immediately. The faint tug on the leash, the subtle command from Martinez, and Lily's whispered words had all aligned. The dog's tail stiffened, his nose lifted, and he took a small step forward. It was a deliberate, controlled movement, signaling recognition and direction. Every officer present realized that Rex was guiding them not just through instinct, but through memory, reconstructing a scene from months ago that no human had fully understood. The suspect shifted nervously in his seat as officers prepared to escort him for questioning. I didn't do anything," he stammered weakly. His voice lacked conviction, and every observer could see the fear reflected in his pale, sweating face. But Rex remained focused, growl low and vibrating in his chest, signaling that the dog's instincts recognized deception. The man's denials were irrelevant against the combined evidence of child memory and K9 instinct. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, officers arrived at the shed indicated by Rex. It was an unassuming structure, partially hidden by overgrown bushes and fallen leaves. The detective team moved cautiously, rifles and flashlights in hand. Rex's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, signaling the presence of a human scent. The officers were careful but urgent, knowing that time was critical. Every step they took was guided by the dog's instinct and the child's recollection, forming an unusual but highly effective partnership. Inside the shed, the officers discovered evidence that confirmed the child's words. Daniel Brooks had indeed been near this location the night he disappeared. Items belonging to him, a jacket, a wallet, and a set of keys, were found neatly tucked in a corner. It was as if someone had tried to hide them quickly, but Rex's extraordinary sense had led investigators directly to them. The evidence was tangible and undeniable, bridging the gap between memory, instinct, and reality. Back in the courtroom, the news filtered in slowly. The spectators whispered in disbelief. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, capturing the unprecedented combination of a toddler's memory and a K9's instincts leading to real-world results. "Unbelievable," one spectator murmured. "A child and a dog solved what months of investigation couldn't." The judge, maintaining composure, allowed the information to be shared with the courtroom in a measured way. Lily, unaware of the full implications, shifted slightly and whispered to Rex again, "Daddy's safe." The dog's ears perked, tail wagged slightly, and he leaned toward the scent he had tracked. Martinez's eyes softened. "Good boy, Rex. You've done it," he murmured. It was clear to everyone that the K9's instincts had successfully guided investigators to the critical location. As officers continued to document the scene and collect evidence, Detective Morales spoke with the suspect. "You attempted to block the search and mislead law enforcement," he said firmly. "We now have evidence of your involvement. Your cooperation is expected, but this discovery will be critical in the prosecution's case." The man's hands trembled, and he realized that the combination of Rex's instincts and Lily's recollection had stripped away any ability to conceal the truth. Jessica held Lily close, tears welling in her eyes. "You helped, honey," she whispered. Lily looked up briefly, a small smile forming on her face. She didn't fully understand how much her memory had contributed, but she knew she had helped the dog, and in doing so had helped her father. The mother and daughter shared a quiet moment, the tension of months slowly lifting. The dog's behavior remained remarkable. Rex sniffed each item carefully, signaling recognition and confirmation to the officers. His body language communicated more than words ever could. This was the place, this was the evidence, and the truth was now undeniable. For the investigators, it was an extraordinary collaboration, human memory and canine instinct converging to solve a case once thought unsolvable. The courtroom awaited updates with bated breath. When the officers reported back, the judge allowed the news to be shared. Daniel Brooks had been located safely nearby, unharmed, and critical evidence from the night of his disappearance had been recovered. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps and murmurs of relief. Reporters scrambled to capture every moment, knowing that this story was unlike any other. A toddler and a K-9 had helped solve a case that had stumped professionals for months. The suspect was now fully in custody, his previous attempts to mislead the investigation rendered meaningless. Rex remained vigilant, every muscle taut, still focused on ensuring that the truth remained protected. The dog's instincts had not only confirmed Lily's memory, but had actively guided law enforcement to the breakthrough that changed everything. Jessica embraced Lily tightly, her tears falling freely now. "You did it, sweetie. You and Rex, you found Daddy," she whispered. Lily's eyes lit up with innocence and pride, not fully understanding the enormity of her contribution but feeling the joy of a small victory. The judge, observing the emotional moment, spoke softly but firmly. "This court recognizes the unique contributions of a young witness and a police K-9 whose instincts and memory have directly influenced this investigation. Today, we have witnessed a remarkable demonstration of courage, insight, and loyalty." The courtroom remained quiet, the weight of the moment understood by all. For Officer Martinez, kneeling beside Rex, the experience was deeply emotional. He had trained dogs for years, seen countless operations, and handled high-stress situations, but never had he witnessed a collaboration quite like this. A child's memory, combined with a dog's instincts, had not only guided an investigation but had saved a life. As the day ended, the courtroom prepared for the final phase of the case. Daniel Brooks' safe location had been confirmed, the suspect's guilt was evident, and critical evidence had been collected. The story of a 3-year-old girl and a police K-9 had captured the hearts and attention of everyone present. And most importantly, the truth, once hidden, obscured, and seemingly unattainable, was finally emerging. The courtroom had transformed into a space of anticipation, relief, and quiet awe. The months of uncertainty, investigation, and unanswered questions were reaching their climax. Daniel Brooks had been located safely, critical evidence had been recovered, and the suspect who had obstructed the original search was now fully in custody. But the most extraordinary part of this case, the 3-year-old girl and the police K-9, remained the heart of the room. Lily, seated on her mother's lap, clutched Jessica's hand tightly. Her eyes were wide with anticipation as she glanced repeatedly at Rex, who remained alert and vigilant. The dog's body was tense, ears perked, tail stiff but wagging slightly, a mixture of readiness and pride. Every officer, detective, and courtroom observer could feel the significance of the moment. It was no longer simply a case of law. It was a story of memory, instinct, and courage converging in a way few had ever witnessed. The judge, maintaining her composed demeanor, addressed the courtroom. "Today, we have witnessed something extraordinary. The collaboration between human recollection and animal instinct has directly influenced the resolution of a case that had confounded investigators for months. This court recognizes the courage, clarity, and intuition demonstrated by this young witness and the police K-9 present. Her words carried weight, and the courtroom absorbed them in quiet reflection. Jessica leaned forward slightly, whispering to Lily, "Honey, look, Daddy is coming." Lily's small eyes lit up with a mix of anticipation and excitement. Though she had no full understanding of the procedural complexities, she understood the emotional weight. Her father, who had been missing, was about to return. Her grip on Rex's paw, offered instinctively, was firm and reassuring, as if she were silently thanking him for his role in the rescue. Outside the courtroom, officers returned with Daniel Brooks. His eyes were wide with relief and disbelief as he stepped into the room. The months of uncertainty had weighed heavily on him, but seeing his daughter and the police K-9 that had helped locate him brought an overwhelming rush of gratitude and emotion. His gaze first found Lily, who waved shyly, and then Rex, who remained seated attentively beside Officer Martinez. Jessica rose from her seat, holding Lily close as she approached Daniel. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Daniel, you're safe." He knelt, enveloping his daughter in a warm embrace. Lily's small arms wrapped around him tightly, her face pressed against his chest. The courtroom collectively exhaled as the reunion unfolded, a perfect, emotional culmination to months of fear, uncertainty, and investigation. Rex, for his part, maintained his disciplined composure. Officer Martinez patted the dog's head gently. "Good boy, Rex. You did it," he whispered. The K-9's tail wagged slightly, his gaze softening now that the threat had passed and the family was safely reunited. It was a moment of quiet pride, the kind that only a dog trained in loyalty and courage could fully appreciate. The suspect, seated and flanked by officers, could only watch as the courtroom celebrated the reunion. His denials from earlier sessions had collapsed under the weight of instinct and memory. Every observer recognized that the combined efforts of a 3-year-old and a K-9 had rendered months of obstruction futile. It was a victory not just for law enforcement, but for truth, instinct, and human courage. Detective Morale stepped forward, addressing the courtroom. The evidence recovered today, guided by both the witness and the K-9, confirms the circumstances of Daniel Brooks' disappearance. Thanks to the remarkable collaboration we have witnessed, we are able to move forward with clarity and certainty in this case. The courtroom responded with nods and murmurs of approval, acknowledging the unusual but effective teamwork that had led to resolution. Lily, perched in her mother's arms, whispered softly to Rex, "Good dog, fine daddy." Her words, innocent yet profound, encapsulated the essence of the story. Trust, memory, and instinct had guided the investigation to a successful conclusion. Rex leaned into her gentle touch, tail wagging slowly, as if acknowledging the unique partnership they shared. The dog and child had achieved something extraordinary, a reminder to everyone present of the power of loyalty, courage, and simple truth. The judge, recognizing the significance of the moment, spoke once more. "This courtroom has witnessed a demonstration of bravery and insight that transcends age and species. We honor the contributions of this young witness and the police K-9 whose instincts have guided law enforcement to resolution. Let this serve as a reminder that truth and courage can emerge in the most unexpected ways." As the proceedings concluded, the courtroom erupted into quiet applause. Spectators, reporters, and legal personnel all acknowledged the extraordinary nature of the events. Cameras captured the moments, documenting the emotional reunion and the acknowledgement of Rex's critical role. Headlines would later reflect the incredible story. A 3-year-old girl and a K-9 had not only guided investigators to critical evidence, but had facilitated the safe return of a missing father. Daniel knelt once more before Lily, brushing her hair gently from her face. "I can't believe you remembered," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe Rex never gave up." Lily smiled faintly, her small hand patting the dog's head in silent affirmation. The bond between child and K-9 had transcended words, forming a bridge between fear, memory, and resolution. Officer Martinez, kneeling beside Rex, observed the scene with quiet satisfaction. Training a K-9 for search and rescue required discipline, patience, and understanding. But witnessing the dog act as both guide and witness in a courtroom was something entirely different. Rex's instincts, honed over years of service, had converged perfectly with Lily's memory, creating an extraordinary collaboration that had changed lives. The suspect, realizing the finality of the situation, was escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs. His previous attempts at deception and obstruction had been rendered meaningless by the unlikely duo who had solved what had seemed impossible. The courtroom exhaled collectively, the tension dissolving into a mixture of relief, admiration, and awe. Daniel embraced his family fully, holding Jessica and Lily close. "Thank you," he whispered, voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Lily, and thank you, Rex." The courtroom witnessed the profound gratitude, a moment that transcended legal procedure, capturing the raw human emotion of reunion, trust, and justice achieved. Lily, small and innocent, hugged her father tightly. Her face was radiant with pride, not fully understanding her role in the events, but aware of her contribution. Her tiny words had bridged months of fear, guiding a dog and law enforcement to the truth. Rex, seated beside Officer Martinez, seemed to acknowledge the human joy unfolding, tail wagging slowly, ears relaxed. The judge finally adjourned the session, her voice warm but firm. "This court is adjourned. Today, we have witnessed a remarkable example of bravery, instinct, and truth. Let it be remembered as a moment where human memory and animal instinct combine to restore justice and reunite a family." The gavel fell softly, signaling the end of proceedings, but the impact of the day would resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Reporters captured the final scenes: Daniel reunited with his family, Lily's proud smile, and Rex's calm yet vigilant presence. The story spread quickly, inspiring headlines and social media coverage that celebrated the unusual but remarkable teamwork between Child and K-9. The public marveled at the simplicity and power of their combined efforts: innocence, memory, and instinct achieving what months of conventional investigation could not. As the family left the courtroom, Daniel carried Lily in his arms, whispering gratitude repeatedly. Jessica held Rex's leash for a moment, scratching behind his ears. "You're a hero, boy," she said softly. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes reflecting the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. For months, the case had been shrouded in uncertainty, fear, and unanswered questions. But through the small voice of a child and the instincts of a loyal police K-9, truth had been revealed. A missing father was reunited with his family, a suspect's deception was exposed, and the courtroom had witnessed an extraordinary example of courage and collaboration. The story would live on as a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and dogs, the power of memory, and the bravery of a child whose simple words, two small words, "hero dog," had changed everything. And in the quiet aftermath, Lily hugged Rex one last time, her small arms wrapped around the dog's neck, a silent acknowledgement of a partnership that had restored a family and changed lives forever.